Welcome back, fellow curious minds. Thank you for joining me once again. Settle in, get comfortable, and let's explore another fascinating story together. Picture this. Before there were gods, before there were humans, before there was even light or darkness, there was nothing. Not emptiness, not void, but something the ancient Greeks called chaos, a yawning chasm of pure potential, waiting to birth the entire universe. What happened next would make modern superhero movies look like children's bedtime stories. We're talking about the most brutal family drama ever conceived. Fathers devouring their children whole, sons castrating their fathers with cosmic sickles, a 10-year war between titans that literally moved mountains. This is the story that every single Greek myth assumes you already know. The foundational operating system that runs beneath Zeus throwing thunderbolts, Athena springing from foreheads, and heroes battling monsters. Without understanding this cosmic family tree of violence and revolution, nothing else in Greek mythology makes sense. Today, we're diving into the Theogony, the birth of the gods themselves, around 700 B.C. A Greek poet named Hesiod sat down and wrote what amounts to the universe's most dysfunctional family history. He called it the Theogony, literally meaning birth of the gods. But this isn't some gentle creation story about divine love and harmony. This is Game of Thrones with cosmic powers and geological consequences. The Greeks understood something profound about existence that we often forget today, that creation and destruction are inseparable, that every generation must overthrow the previous one to survive, that the very forces that build the world are the same ones that tear it apart. These weren't just stories to the Greeks. They were explanations for everything. Why does thunder crash? Zeus is angry. Why do earthquakes happen? Poseidon is shaking his trident. Why do crops grow? Demeter is pleased. But to understand why Zeus has those thunderbolts, why Poseidon controls earthquakes, why these particular gods have these specific powers, you need to know how they fought a war to earn them. So let's go back to the very beginning, before Mount Olympus, before the 12 gods, before anything existed except pure, formless potential. In the beginning was chaos. But here's the thing, the Greeks understood that we often miss. Chaos doesn't mean disorder or confusion. It means the yawning gap, the cosmic chasm, the space between what is and what could be. From this primordial openness, 4 fundamental forces spontaneously emerged, not created by anyone, not planned or designed. They simply became. First came Gaia, Mother Earth herself, not just the planet we walk on, but the living, breathing, thinking foundation of all existence. Hesiod calls her the ever-sure foundation of all the deathless ones. She would become the ultimate mother, but also the ultimate schemer. Second came Tartarus, the deepest, darkest pit beneath even the underworld, a place so far below the earth that if you dropped an anvil into it, the anvil would fall for 9 full days before hitting bottom. This wasn't just a location. It was a conscious, brooding presence. Third came Eros, but not the cute cherub with arrows we think of today. This was Eros as cosmic force, the fundamental drive that compels all things to unite, to reproduce, to create new combinations. Without Eros, nothing would ever join with anything else. The universe would remain scattered fragments forever. Fourth came Erebus, primordial darkness, not the absence of light, but darkness as a positive force, as real and substantial as light itself. Now here's where things get interesting. These primordial forces immediately start reproducing. Chaos births Erebus and Nyx, who is night herself. Erebus and Nyx come together to produce ether, which is the upper atmosphere where light lives, and Hemera, who is day. But it's Gaia who really gets busy, because Earth has a problem. She's fertile, creative, bursting with potential, but she has no partner. So what does she do? She creates her own, all by herself, through what the Greeks called parthenogenesis, virgin birth. Gaia brings forth Uranus, the sky, not just the blue dome above us, but the conscious, masculine heaven, who will become her husband and her equal. She also creates the Aurea, the mountains, and Pontus, the sea. But it's Uranus who matters, because now Earth has found her mate. Imagine the first cosmic marriage, Sky spreading himself across Earth every night, the two of them together, creating the first divine children. This should have been the beginning of a golden age. Instead, it became the template for every dysfunctional family in human history. Gaia and Uranus had 18 children together. 12 of them were the Titans, the first generation of recognizable gods. Oceanus, who was all the world's rivers. Hyperion, the first light. Rhea, who would become the mother of the Olympians. Kronos, who would become the most dreadful of all. But they also had 6 others, 3 Cyclopes, each with a single eye in the center of their forehead. Master craftsmen capable of forging weapons that could reshape reality itself. And 3 hecaton sharers, the 100-handed ones, giants with 50 heads each and 100 arms, so powerful they could grab entire mountains and hurl them like stones. Now, you might think Uranus would be proud of these mighty children. Instead, he was terrified. The moment each child was born, Uranus would seize it and stuff it back into Gaia's womb. All 18 of his children, imprisoned inside their mother's body. Can you imagine the pain this caused Earth herself? Her own husband using her as a prison for their children, all because he was afraid they might grow up to challenge his power. This went on for who knows how long. Gaia growing larger and larger, stretched beyond endurance, filled with her own imprisoned offspring, until finally she couldn't take it anymore. Deep inside herself, in the fires that would later become volcanic forges, Gaia crafted a weapon, a sickle made from adamantine, a metal harder than diamond, sharper than obsidian, capable of cutting through anything in the universe, even the flesh of immortal gods. Then she called her children to council and made them an offer. Who among you will take vengeance on your father for his evil deed? He was first to devise unseemly actions. The older Titans hesitated. This was their father she was talking about, the sky himself. How do you attack something that vast, that fundamental to existence itself? But the youngest spoke up. Kronos, later called the one with crooked counsels. He looked at his mother's weapon and said, "Mother, I will undertake to accomplish this deed. I do not care for our abominable father." Since he was first to devise unseemly actions, the trap was set. Gaia hid Kronos in a crevice deep within herself, the adamantine sickle clutched in his hands. Then they waited for evening, when Sky would come down to cover Earth for their nightly union. When Uranus descended, spreading himself across Gaia in cosmic embrace, Kronos struck. With one terrible swing of the sickle, He castrated his own father, severing Sky's manhood and hurling it into the Mediterranean Sea. The scream that Uranus let out shattered the evening air. But even as he howled in agony, even as he pulled himself back up into the heavens, never again to lie so close to Earth, his blood was creating new life. Where the drops of blood hit the ground, 3 new races sprang up. The Gigantes, giants who would later war against the Olympian gods. The Erinyes, the Furies, who would forever pursue those who committed crimes against family. And the Meliae, nymphs of the ash tree, who would become the mothers of the Bronze Age of humanity. But the most amazing birth happened far out in the wine-dark sea, where Uranus's severed genitals hit the waves. A white foam spread around them, and from that foam, from an act of ultimate violence and castration, arose Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty, born from her grandfather's mutilation, rising from the sea near Cyprus, like a pearl from an oyster of pain. The irony was perfect and terrible. Love born from violence, beauty arising from the ugliest act imaginable. The Greeks understood that creation and destruction were 2 faces of the same cosmic force. But the story was just beginning, because as Uranus fled back to the heights of heaven, he turned and pronounced a curse that would echo through the generations. Kronos, you will pay for this deed. One of your own children will do to you exactly what you have done to me. The youngest Titan had won his revolution, but at what cost? Kronos became the new king of the universe. His first act was to free his siblings from their mother's womb. The Titans emerged, blinking in the light, ready to help their brother rule this new age. But Kronos had also freed the Cyclopes and the Hecatoncheires, and looking at these monstrous, powerful beings, he felt the same fear his father had felt. What if they decided to rebel against him too? So Kronos made his first terrible mistake. He re-imprisoned the Cyclopes and the Hecatoncheires, casting them down into Tartarus, just as his father had cast them into Gaia's womb. The very injustice he had fought against, he now perpetuated. The revolutionary had become the tyrant. For ages, Kronos ruled over what would later be remembered as the Golden Age. Humanity lived without war, without want, without aging. It should have been paradise. But Uranus's curse haunted every moment. So when Kronos married his sister Rhea, and she became pregnant with their first child, paranoia consumed him. The moment baby Hestia was born, Kronos snatched her from her mother's arms and swallowed her whole. Not killed her. Remember, these are immortal beings. Just swallowed her. His own daughter disappeared down his throat, alive and conscious, trapped in her father's belly. Rhea was horrified. But what could she do? Her husband was the king of the universe, armed with the same adamantine sickle that had castrated his father. When the second child was born, little Demeter, the same thing happened. Down Kronos' throat she went. Third child, Hera, who would one day become the queen of the gods, swallowed. Fourth child, Hades, future lord of the underworld, swallowed. Fifth child, Poseidon, destined to rule the seas, swallowed. Can you imagine Rhea's anguish? 5 children born, 5 children devoured by their own father the moment they drew breath. 5 little gods trapped in Kronos' stomach, growing up in darkness, never seeing light, never feeling their mother's touch. When Rhea became pregnant for the 6th time, she knew she couldn't endure it again. Desperate, she went to her parents, Gaia and Uranus, and begged for help. They told her to travel to the island of Crete, to a cave deep beneath Mount Aigaion. There, in secret, she could give birth to her sixth child. They had a plan, so when her time came, Rhea fled to Crete and gave birth to a son, Zeus, the child who would change everything. But back home, Kronos was waiting for his wife to return with his newest victim. Rhea appeared, carrying a bundle wrapped in swaddling clothes, just as she had 5 times before. Only this time, it wasn't a baby in those clothes. It was a stone, a rock wrapped to look and feel like an infant. And Kronos, so paranoid, so consumed with the need to devour his children that he never even looked, swallowed the stone whole. Meanwhile, hidden in that Cretan cave, baby Zeus was being raised by the most unusual nursemaids in history. The goat Amalthea provided his milk. The Melii, those ash tree nymphs born from his grandfather's blood, cared for his daily needs. And when baby Zeus cried, as all babies do, the Chorates and the Dactyls, warrior spirits of the mountains, would perform thunderous war dances outside the cave. They would clash their spears against their shields, creating such a din that no one could hear the infant's voice. They were protecting the future king of the gods by turning childcare into military operation. Zeus grew up in that cave, nursed on divine goat's milk, trained by mountain warriors, learning the secrets of earth and sky from Gaia herself. And when he reached adulthood, he knew exactly what he had to do. Using a trick his grandmother Gaia had taught him, Zeus approached his father Kronos, disguised as a cupbearer. He offered the Titan king a special drink, a potion that would make him vomit up everything he had ever swallowed. Kronos drank deeply, and then his stomach began to convulse. First came the stone, the rock that had saved Zeus's life, shooting out of Kronos' throat to land far away. Later, the Greeks would set up that stone at Delphi as a sacred relic. But then came the children. 5 adult gods emerged from their father's gullet, ready for war. Hestia, goddess of the hearth. Demeter, goddess of the harvest. Hera, the future queen. Hades, lord of the dead. Poseidon, master of earthquakes and seas. They had grown up in darkness, but they had grown up strong, and they were furious. Zeus looked around at his liberated siblings and knew that 6 gods, even working together, wouldn't be enough to overthrow the Titans. He needed more allies, bigger allies. So he did something that showed his strategic genius. He traveled down to Tartarus, to the deepest pit of the underworld, where the Cyclopes and the Hecatoncheires had been imprisoned for ages beyond counting. Guarding them was a she-dragon named Campe, a monster so terrible that even the Titans feared her. Zeus killed Campe with his bare hands, shattering her chains, and freed the prisoners his father had wronged. The Cyclopes were so grateful that they immediately got to work. These master craftsmen forged 3 weapons that would become legendary. For Zeus, they created the thunderbolt, a spear of pure lightning that could shatter mountains. For Poseidon, they forged the trident, a 3-pronged weapon that could create earthquakes and tidal waves. For Hades, they crafted a helmet of invisibility, allowing the Lord of the Dead to move unseen through any realm. The Hecatoncheires, those 100-handed giants, pledged their strength to Zeus's cause. Each one of them could grab entire mountains and hurl them like stones. They were living siege engines, capable of devastating entire landscapes. But Zeus still needed more. So he sent messengers throughout the cosmos, calling every god and goddess to choose sides. The war between the Titans and the Olympians was about to begin. Most of the Titans rallied to Kronos on Mount Othrys, but some chose Zeus. Themis, the Titaness of divine law, recognized that justice was on the young god's side. Prometheus, whose name means forethought, was clever enough to see which way the war would go. And then came the defection that signaled cosmic legitimacy was shifting. Styx, the river that flows through the underworld, the river by which the gods swear their most binding oaths, brought her 4 children to Zeus. Nike, who was victory herself, Zealous, who was rivalry, Kratos, who was strength, and Bia, who was force. When victory herself chose Zeus, everyone knew the old order was doomed. The war that followed lasted 10 years. 10 years of divine combat that shook the foundations of reality itself. The battlefield was ancient Thessaly, where Mount Olympus faced Mount Othrys across a plain that became a wasteland of cosmic destruction. Zeus's thunderbolts split the sky. Poseidon's trident cracked the earth. The hecatoncheires grabbed mountains by their roots and hurled them at their enemies. The very landscape was their ammunition. Leading the Titans was Atlas, son of Iapetus, a giant so strong he could bear the weight of the entire sky on his shoulders. Under his generalship, the Titans held their own for years. But Zeus had advantages beyond just powerful allies. He was a better politician than his father. While Kronos ruled through fear, Zeus inspired loyalty. He promised his followers honor, glory, and positions in his new world order. More importantly, Zeus had learned the lesson that neither Uranus nor Kronos had understood, that you cannot rule through oppression alone, that true power comes from earning the cooperation of those you govern. The war's turning point came when the hecatoncheires finally entered the battle in force. Picture this: 3 giants, each with 100 arms and 50 heads, standing on the slopes of Mount Olympus. In their 300 hands, they held boulders the size of cities, and then they began to throw. The barrage was indescribable. Entire peaks vanished under the avalanche of stone. The Titans, for all their power, could not withstand an assault that turned the sky itself into a weapon. Atlas fell. Kronos fell. One by one, the Titans were overwhelmed, beaten down, captured. Zeus's victory was total. But what he did next showed why he would succeed where his father and grandfather had failed. Instead of simply destroying his enemies, Zeus was strategic about punishment. Most of the Titans were cast into Tartarus, imprisoned behind gates of bronze, guarded by the very hecatoncheires who had won the war. They would spend eternity as prisoners, but they would live. Atlas received a special punishment. For his leadership of the Titan forces, he was condemned to hold up the sky itself. His immense strength, which had made him so dangerous in war, would now serve the new cosmic order forever. Every day, for all eternity, Atlas would bear the weight of the heavens on his shoulders. It was brilliant. Zeus didn't just defeat his enemies. He transformed them into infrastructure for his new universe. With the war won, Zeus and his siblings divided up creation. Zeus became king of the gods and ruler of the sky. Poseidon took dominion over all the seas and rivers. Hades, though he drew the short straw, became lord of the underworld and all the dead. The 3 sisters took their own roles. Hestia became goddess of the hearth, the sacred fire at the center of every home. Demeter became goddess of agriculture and the harvest. Hera, despite a rocky marriage, became Zeus's wife and queen of the gods. Together with 6 other deities, they formed the 12 Olympians. the pantheon that would rule from Mount Olympus for the rest of mythological time. But here's what makes this story so remarkable. The Greeks didn't present this as a simple tale of good triumphing over evil. Zeus was better than Kronos. Yes, more just, more strategic, more willing to share power. But he had still overthrown his father through violence. He had still used weapons of war to reshape the cosmic order. The pattern that began with Kronos castrating Uranus had continued, each generation overthrowing the last through superior force and better alliances. The Greeks understood that progress comes through conflict, that every golden age is built on the ruins of what came before, and they weren't done with the pattern yet. Later myths would tell of giants rising from the earth to challenge Zeus, of the monster Typhon nearly overthrowing Olympus itself, the cycle of challenge and response, of revolution and counter-revolution would continue. But Zeus had broken the chain in one crucial way. Unlike Uranus, who imprisoned his children in their mother's womb, and unlike Kronos, who swallowed his children whole, Zeus would raise his own offspring to be allies rather than threats. Well, mostly. Zeus had his own complicated relationship with fatherhood, but that's a story for another episode. What matters is that this cosmic family tree of violence and revolution had finally produced a stable ending. The Olympian order that Zeus established would last, not because it was perfect, but because it was adaptable, because Zeus had learned that true power comes not from preventing change, but from managing it. This is the operating system that runs beneath every other Greek myth. When Homer tells us about Achilles and Hector fighting outside the walls of Troy, he assumes we know that Zeus's thunderbolts give him authority to intervene. When we hear about Perseus slaying the Medusa, we understand that Athena can help him because she's one of Zeus's daughters, born from the king of gods himself. Every hero's quest, every divine romance, every monster's rampage happens within the cosmic order that began with chaos and culminated with Zeus's rise to power. The Greeks built the greatest mythology in human history on this foundation of primordial violence and revolutionary change. But more than that, they understood something profound about existence itself. That creation requires destruction, that every generation must surpass the previous one to survive, that the very forces that build civilization are the same ones that eventually tear it down. The Titans weren't evil. They were simply the previous version of divinity, overthrown by a better model. And Zeus himself, for all his power and wisdom, ruled a universe where change was the only constant, where new challenges would always arise to test the established order. In the end, that's what makes Greek mythology so endlessly fascinating. It doesn't promise us that good will triumph over evil, or that the righteous will inherit the earth. Instead, it shows us a cosmos where power shifts, where yesterday's revolutionary becomes tomorrow's tyrant, where the only certainty is that everything eventually changes. The Greeks looked at this story of chaos, birthing titans, birthing Olympians, and saw the truth of their own world, that every empire rises by overthrowing the previous one, that every golden age is built on the bones of what came before, that the price of creation is always destruction. And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly how the universe is supposed to work. And that's where we'll leave things for today. Thank you for listening, as always. If this journey sparked your curiosity, there's plenty more to explore. So stay tuned. Until next time, keep questioning, keep wondering, and never stop looking back to understand the road ahead.